The bridge of the Karas Vantum, SAS, silent, was sat except for the sound of Admiral Threll's claws tapping against the armrest of his command chair. On the main view screen, a single, human shuttle, barely the size of a lifeboat, drifted directly into the shadow of his flagship. 9 kilometers of reinforced hull, 4,000 plasma cannons, 4,000 plasmons. A ship built to end civilizations, and it was shaking, not from weapons fire, not from an attack. The Karas Vantum, the pride of the Threlkari Dominion, the largest warship ever constructed by any species in known space, was trembling like a wounded animal, its internal support struts groaning under a stress no engineer had ever calculated for. Report, Threll snarled, his 4 eyes darting between failing displays. Structure integrity at 60% and falling. So, his engineer answered, voice cracking. Admiral, the human isn't attacking us, she's just sitting there. And we're tearing ourselves apart. None of this had begun that way. 3 days earlier, the Threlkari Dominion had been celebrating. After a decade of engineering, sacrifice, and the wealth of 6 conquered systems, they had unveiled the Karas Vantum to the galaxy. A vessel so large, so large it required its own gravitation under its own mass. Kafis and Simpash just to keep from collapsing under its own mass. Dominion propaganda called it unbreakable, unstoppable, a monument to Threlkari supremacy. The humans, when they heard of it, had done something no one expected. They laughed, not out of arrogance, out of recognition, because humanity had built ships like this before. Centuries ago, in their own bloody history, when nations raced to build bigger and bigger battleships, each one more magnificent and more useless than the last. Bisisi. They had a word for it. Ancient and specific, dug up from forgotten naval archives. Dreadnought disease. Rim. And Commander Elena Voss, of the Terran Exploratory Fleet, and Shahzad Raza Dashtiti, had spent 4 years studying exactly how those diseases killed their hosts. The Dominion had summoned her under a flag of parley, expecting a diplomat, expecting fear. What they received instead was a woman in a plain gray flight suit, unarmed, unarmored, stepping off a shuttle that had no weapons systems at all. You brought no escort, Threll said, looming over her on the docking platform, his 4-meter frame casting a shadow that swallowed her whole. No fleet, not even a sidearm. Either humans are fools or you believe you're fools, untouchable. Neither, Elena said calmly, looking up at eyes that could have crushed her without effort. I came to see the ship your people are so proud of. Threll's mandibles clicked in something like amusement. Then, look, small creature, look upon the Karas Vantum and understand why your fleet will kneel. He walked her through corridors longer than city streets, past hangars that could swallow entire human destroyers. Dasim, Fasa Dase. Dasim clone. Shahzad Razadashti, past gun batteries larger than her home. Every step was meant to make her small. Every hallway was meant to make her afraid. She wasn't afraid. She was taking notes. The truth stunned everyone watching from the Dominion's monitoring stations. The human commander wasn't looking at weapons She was looking at seams. At the places where hull plates met, where support beams joined, where 9 kilometers of ambition had been welded together in record time to beat a political deadline. Silp, you built this in 11 years, she said finally. Standing at the base of the ship's primary spine, staring up into the dim distance where the ceiling of the compartment vanished into tonneau, engineering, scaffolding, and scaffold. Our species built something almost this size once. 20 years. And we still got it wrong. Your species failed. We did not, Threll said. You didn't fail yet, Elena corrected softly. That's different. That night, in the officers' mess, Threll's second in command, a sharp-eyed strategist named Vex, who had opposed the Vantum project since its inception, found Elena alone at a viewport, watching stars slide past the edge of the ship's impossible hull. You unsettle the Admiral, Vex said, sitting across from her, uninvited. He does not know what to do with a threat that carries no weapon. When I'm not a threat, Elena said. You are the only being in this system he cannot predict. That makes you the most dangerous thing aboard. Vex studied her with something between suspicion and curiosity. Why did you truly come here, Commander? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Because ships like this have a pattern, and patterns end the same way, no matter which species builds them. What pattern? Pride outrunning physics. Vex didn't understand. Not yet. But he would. What Vex didn't know, what almost no one aboard the Karos Vantum knew, was that Elena carried a private grief of her own into that conversation. Years before the Dominion had ever unveiled their flagship, humanity had built its own monument. He had built its own monument to ambition. The Ares Colossus, a vessel meant to prove that Earth could outbuild any rival empire in the sector. Elena had served on its maiden voyage as a junior engineer, young and proud, and certain that bigger meant better. So, she had been in the aft compartment when the Colossus's spine fractured during a routine deceleration burn, and she had spent 11 hours pulling survivors from bulkheads that had folded like paper. Dasadame. 41 of her crewmates never came home. She still remembered every one of their names, in the order she'd lost them, the way some people remember scripture. She hadn't told Threll that story. She hadn't told anyone here. But it was the reason her hands didn't shake when the alarms finally began, and the reason she moved toward the danger instead of away from it. Grief, she had learned a long time ago, could be turned into precision. If you let it, and if you survived long enough to learn how. The Council had made a terrible mistake, though none of them knew it yet. In their rush to complete the Vantum before a rival faction could claim naval supremacy, the Dominion shipwrights had done what desperate builders always do. They cut corners. No one was supposed to notice. Support lattices, thinned by 2% to save material costs. Compensator arrays installed a full generation behind schedule. Incest sustain, redundant systems quietly removed to hit a deadline that mattered more to politicians than engineers. Small choices. Sa. Invisible choices. The kind that never matter, until they do. Elena had seen the signs within an hour of boarding. Asher. Hairline stress patterns in the deck. Plating. A faint, almost inaudible harmonic vibration running through the ship's spine, the sound of 9 kilometers of metal, fighting its own gravity. Every second of every day. She didn't tell them. Not directly. Instead, she asked to see the ship's central engineering core. And there, she asked one question that would change everything. What happens to this ship if its main gravitic compensator fails during a hard maneuver? The room went silent, because no one had ever run that simulation. No one had wanted to know the answer, but no one expected what happened next. 2 days later, a Dominion rival fleet, the Skarnoth Remnant, Musant, longtime enemies of the Threlkari, sensing weakness in the newly unveiled flagship, launched a surprise strike at the edge of the system. Not a full assault. A single, calculated maneuver, a squadron of fast attack craft, designed to fast the Vant craft, designed to force the Vantum into an emergency evasive turn. They didn't need to destroy the ship. They only needed to make it move. Admiral II Threll, cornered and furious, gave the order before Elena could stop him. Full evasive burn. Every engine, every thruster, every compensator pushed to maximum in the same instant. The Karas Vantum screamed. 9 kilometers of hull, built 2% thinner than it should have been. Twisted under forces its designers had never modeled. The harmonic vibration. The harmonic vibration Elena had heard in the engineering core became a groan. Then, a shudder that rattled teeth throughout the ship. Then an alarm that no one aboard had ever heard before, because it had nas before, to saz. It had never needed to sound. Structural failure. Imminent in the aft third, the ship's systems. Announced in a flat, indifferent voice. Compensator array, offline. Recommend, immediate. The recommendation never finished. The compensator array died first. Emotion tore through the bridge. Not the calm discipline Threll had commanded for a decade, but raw, unfiltered panic. Officers who had trained their entire lives for war had never trained for their own ship, trying to kill them. Osasi. She warned us, Vex said quietly, staring at Elena across the chaos of the bridge. Where she stood. Still unarmed. Still calm. Bracing herself against a support pillar as the deck lurched beneath them. I asked a question. Elena said. You never asked it yourselves. That wasn't even the biggest surprise. While alarms shrieked and officers scrambled for emergency stations, Elena moved. Not toward an escape pod. Toward the failing compensator array. Dragging an engineering technician half her size along half her size along by the sleeve, shouting instructions in broken Threlkari that she'd spent 3 sleepless nights memorizing from Dominion technical manuals. Namonin. Ra-root, auxiliary power through the secondary lattice, now, before the harmonic resonance reaches the crew decks. That's not rated for full load. It doesn't need to hold forever. It needs to hold for 90 seconds. The technician stared at her, uncomprehending, terrified, and then, because there was no better option and no time to find one, obeyed. 90 seconds. Long enough for the ship's the spine. Long enough for the ship's automated systems to stabilize the spine. Long enough for the groaning, shuddering nightmare of 9 kilometers of collapsing metal to shudder to a halt, instead of tearing itself in half. When the shocking finally stopped, the silence on the bridge was heavier than the alarms had been. Admiral Threll turned to Elena, his 4 eyes wide, his voice stripped of every trace of the arrogance he'd worn like armor 3 days earlier. "You saved my ship," he said. "The vessel you called broken." "Why?" Elena wiped sweat from her brow, hands still trembling from the adrenaline. "Because a dead crew doesn't learn anything. And because, somewhere out there, your engineers are going to build a better ship next time, and I'd rather they build it after learning this lesson than after burying 4,000 of your people. Seep, Tasab, Datap. The Council had made a terrible mistake, and now they had to decide what to do about it. Not the mistake of building the Vantum, but the mistake of nearly refusing the one voice that had tried to save it. In the days that followed, as engineering crews swarmed the ship, making desperate repairs, Vex approached Elena one final time, no longer suspicious, no longer guarded. "Your species has done this before," he said. "Your species has done this before. Built dreams too large for your own strength." "More than once," Elena admitted. "We buried a lot of sailors learning the difference between ambition and wisdom, and yet you still build. We just build smarter each time. That's the only thing that separates surviving pride from the kind that sinks you." Admiral Threll, standing nearby, said nothing for a long while. Then, in a gesture that stunned every Dominion officer present, he removed his ceremonial gauntlet, a mark of rank worn by Threlkari admirals for 1,000 years, and placed it in Elena's palm. "You did not come here to conquer us," he said. "You came to keep us from conquering ourselves. That is a harder kind of strength than any weapon I command." Elena closed her fingers around the gauntlet, looking up at the ship towering above them both. Scarred now, humbled now, but still standing. "Then build the next one right," she said. "I'll be watching." Threll studied her for a long moment, and something in his Ra's eyes shifted. And something in his 4 eyes shifted. Not the calculation of a commander anymore, but the quiet recognition of one survivor toward another. "You never told me why you understood our mistake so completely, Commander. A stranger does not read a ship's bones that well by accident." Elena was quiet for a moment, the gauntlet cold and heavy in her palm. "Because I buried 41 people who trusted a hull that was never as strong as we told them it was," she said finally. "I promised myself I'd never let it happen again. Not to my crew. Not to anyone's." Threll bowed, his massive head slow and deliberate. A gesture. Vex later explained to the rest of the bridge crew that the Dominion reserved only for those who had earned it through sacrifice. Through sacrifice, not rank or birth. Then, the Vantum did not just survive today, he said. It survived because of a grief you carried quietly across the stars to warn us with. That is a debt my people do not forget, Commander, and neither will I. She turned and walked back toward her unarmed shuttle, alone, the same way she'd arrived, and somewhere behind her, for the first time in a decade, the Karas Phantom fell silent, its spine finally still. Not because it had won a battle, because, at last, it had learned how not to lose one to itself. And somewhere among the Saha the stars, 41 names that had waited years to matter again finally did. Ask. If this story moved you, stay close. The next one is already taking shape, and it's going to hit even harder. See you there.